Hello, everyone. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IoT Today. We're excited to bring you another great interview. Today, we're here sitting down with Dave Wilson. He's managing director of IoT Global Sales at Cisco. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, John. Thanks, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear some of what Cisco's been doing. Everyone knows Cisco. We've seen you. We use your products. But tell us a little bit about yourself and also maybe Cisco's role in healthcare and IoT, since that's the discussion today.
Yeah. So, well, for me, hey, look, first of all, I'm a human being versus a Cisco being. I've been at Cisco 10 years, but I am a father of five and a beautiful granddaughter. Recently, you can tell maybe from my accent, I'm not from the US, so I'm from New Zealand. And in the last 12 months, I've moved up here to California, looking after our IoT sales business.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if timing was great. New Zealand's done so well, but anyway, that's a topic another day.
That's another topic. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about Cisco and IoT, the experience they have.
Yeah, like you say, like we're a pretty big household name, especially up here in the US. I mean, I guess we're renowned for the internet and route switch wireless. That's where we've carved it out. I guess I would say, where IoT comes into that, and Cisco is now more about we built the internet. Then it's now about the internet of the future. And so, what does that look like? And a huge part of that is IoT, is part of the internet of the future, and what we're connecting, why we're connecting, and the value of what we're connecting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great vision for that, and I think we're going to talk about some of that with 5G and Wi-Fi 6 as well. But before we get to that, tell us, where is IoT today? And you can do IoMT, right? Internet of Medical Things as well, which to me there's an overlap. I guess IoMT is a subset of IoT. But where is that really being used in healthcare? I mean, we've heard for years that IoT is going to transform healthcare, but where is it really being used today?
Yeah, I think it's all over the place. If we think about, is it here, is it coming? It's like any kind of transformation. It's like always here, but never quite here. I think if you look at us, I guess what everybody might not know about Cisco is we've been in IoT, which wouldn't have been called IoT then, maybe machine to machine and other bits and pieces. It was even for a while called Internet of Things. We've been in this for over 10 years. So, for those of us that have been in this journey, we've been waiting for this big, I guess, coming together of the convergence of IT and OT. So I guess that's where I would start. And I'd say right now we're right at the edge of that breakthrough of where it's really relevant for business. Business are thinking about it, and the technology and the value it brings is front of mind right now. So you've got players that have been in the market, 5 seconds and are bringing innovation. And you've got players like us that turn up to this convergence of IT and OT that have tens of years of experience, and I guess come with a fast start, and also the learnings from what hasn't worked over the years.
What are some of the leaders and some of your customers doing that are really pushing IoT forward? Is it about remote patient monitoring? Is it IoT medical devices in the healthcare organization? What do you see really dominating, from a leadership standpoint? Because of course there's leaders that adopt early, and then, we know the Gartner cycle, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's familiar with that. What are those leaders doing right now with IoT?
Yeah, I mean, the real quick and sharp way is they're being very innovative and creative, right? And I think that's what this brings. Like, if you think about, again, Cisco's history, we've helped digitize, if you want to simplify it, some of the carpeted spaces of environments, which usually were campuses or branch or head offices. But along that journey, what comes with digitization comes innovation and creativity. It's our customers know their business so much better than we do, obviously. It's what we can bring to them is, how do we help you understand how to digitize, what you can digitize, and then what creativity and innovation is unlocked with that, including the ecosystems around the place. If you look at IoT now, when you talk about what are other players doing or other vendors, there's this whole ecosystem that comes around when something's digitized. Whereas before, when it was, it's very protocol based, it's very siloed. One company has a dominant position, and you don't have that whole ecosystem that you do when you digitize something that comes from a bunch of application developers or people out there starting companies. So right now, there's a lot going on in IoT. There's a lot going on in health, and for us, we're sitting down in meetings, basically doing what I'm saying. We're talking about how we can digitize, what you need to be aware of, and what you need to do when you do that from the learnings we've learned over the years of digitizing these other spaces. And then really it's the art of the possible when it comes to what they can do with, and that's really how a lot of these leading companies are thinking, that they're releasing like, oh, we could do this and we could do that. Basically, yeah, there's pretty much no limit right now to what they can do.
And what's the value they're really looking to derive from these efforts? Is it about just getting access to the data from remote patients? Is it, like how do they justify a purchase and investment in IoT? What's the value they're looking at?
Yeah, data is some of it. And we have heard about the big data for a long time until it's kind of got big data fatigue. But what I would say is the value and the richness of the data that comes from IoT and the edges of our environments, like hospitals, is a lot richer and more important data than we probably saw in the first wave of what was called big data. So are companies trying to get access to that? 100%. What comes with richer data means you also need to act on it a lot faster. If you think about maybe some of the data that was collected in the first wave for businesses, you could take it back somewhere centrally to a cloud or a multi-cloud. You can analyze it, you can think about it, you can send it back. In critical environments like health, once you collect that data, it's no point 1 week later or 1 month later finding out that you should have acted on that within seconds or minutes, let alone weeks. So I think that's the big difference here when we talk about data. So when they want data, they really want it, but then they need to go, how do we integrate that into our systems and our platforms to actually act on that right now? And so, a lot of that for them is connecting to a multi-cloud. So what does that mean? A lot of them haven't done that before in these sort of spaces. And I guess there's been, for good reason, there's been a hesitancy in a lot of companies to connect something to the cloud or to the internet, robotics machines, life-saving support machines, because everybody knows once you connect something to the internet, it can be reached, be that for good or bad. And so, yeah, there's everything that comes with digitization is, yeah, a big part of data, connecting to the multi-cloud, but also how do you do that securely, resiliently, and how do you bring automation to that?
I think that's a great point, that if you look over the past decade, the thing that's changed the most, certainly we've had more sensors, more devices, et cetera, but probably the bigger thing that's changed is the access to that data and the speed at which that data can be processed and then put at the point of care. It's probably what's changed the most, in the last decade, because we've had devices for a long time, but we haven't had the bandwidth, the pipes, the data processing, et cetera, to really process all of that big data, right, device data, and put it at the point of care. So that is interesting, as far as a massive change. I think it is a challenge, though, for, obviously at Healthcare IT Today, we publish for healthcare organizations largely. And if I'm a CIO looking over this, I'm like, this has been accelerated by telehealth, but now I'm going to be having to manage thousands of extra devices. So what are some of the implications you see with your customers around having to deploy thousands of devices, whether it's security, whether it's support, whether it's user error, right? Like IT shops have to support almost like a consumer-centric support user experience. So, but what are some of the implications you see in regards to managing just this explosion of devices?
Yeah, so I mean, you've touched on like a lot of hot points there that are very valid for someone maybe who is running, a CIO running the health, looking after a hospital or a district area, and everything that plays in mind. The one thing that's different, you're right, the volume of things connecting is significantly more than when we were connecting people through a laptop or an iPhone that would have been their first phase of how are we connecting these. And you're right, they would have had teams sitting in the background programming this. We've now moved to a point with automation and provisioning tools and all the tools around the support of this that allows, as we talk about like moving to the internet of the future, you're right, you just can't sit there and manage with human eyes, with human fingers, touch typing, bringing on board one new employee or maybe 10 new employees for the week when you're bringing on possibly thousands of sensors a week in somewhere like this. So yeah, we have built our new systems. Everything we're building at Cisco is around not looking back, but looking forward on how do you do this at scale? How do you support at scale? How do you use new technologies around, machine learning, around AI to do a lot of not only provisioning, but picking up where there's problems and auto-fixing things beforehand. So a lot of this is also built around, how do we scale as, hospitals and anyone in IoT does these sort of deployments or looks at these sort of things. Security is another one. It's something that you have to do. Like I said, a lot of the traditional places we digitize have had years and years of, being hacked or having problems, and they've built up a methodology, the same would, and technology stack, the same as would a CIO. It's no different now, except we're connecting lots of things that are probably more critical than what the laptop was connected to a human being who is a patient, or so how much more critical is it to get your security right? And that's a must. So, and that's why we're always saying, yes, access your data, learn how to bring that into applications that have existed for other organizations for years that have been stuck in a silo legacy application from maybe a traditional 30-year vendor. You can pull all this stuff out and act on it, and they're amazed at that. Don't forget about building a secure, resilient network, because now that everything can connect to everything, that's the first foundation building block in digitization. And so it's critical that they get that right. But yet again, using and leveraging more modern technology and tools to secure it as opposed to what would have been in the past.
Yeah, there's a lot of CIOs and CISOs I think are being kept up at night as their threat framework, I think is what they call it, right? Their threat surface is expanding. So I think that's definitely a challenge. Who's going to pay for all of this? Like, what, do we need value-based care for it? Is kind of the question I ask. Or are there initiatives today that are able to pay for all this? Do the payers need to pay for it? Do the patients need to pay for it? How do you see that playing out?
I don't see any different to IT today to who's paying for it, being the provider, the hospital or the service health provider or whoever it is. We don't see any shift or change in that. We see some shift and change of teams coming together. Typically when you have this sort of transition, the budgets sit with, what we might call Cisco lines of business. So the budget right now still might not sit with IT. I think in any transition you see that, no matter whether it was voice to data and everything else. And so I think there'll probably be a period of, be it a hospital, does IT own the budget yet? I would say they wouldn't own all of it. So there'll be definitely a relationship with IT in the line of business to provide that value to whatever part of the hospital it is that owns that budget today and wants to see the benefit and the innovation of digitizing. So there'll be that. I think there'll be a shift over years, like there always has been, where IT will get more of the budget as well, to be able to just baseline provide these digital services to every part of the hospital, no matter what division. There'll be obviously leading divisions and leaders inside those that are more, more innovative mindset that will want to, push boundaries like in any division, and I think we'll see that as well. But it'll still come down right now. What we're seeing is no real change to the individual companies will be the ones that will fund it.
No, I think that's a great analysis of the various budgets and really how innovation is funded, right? I mean, if you have an IoT innovation in the cardiology department, then they're going to fund it, right? Whereas, another department that hasn't had that innovation yet won't. And then, of course, it comes back. And they say, wait, why are we managing 15 projects? And why is IT not involved? Yeah, it's amazing how these cycles continue. Let's shift gears a little. We've heard a lot about 5G. I think everyone's familiar with 5G. I'm hearing more and more about Wi-Fi 6 as well. And, do you want to explain a little Wi-Fi 6 for those that aren't familiar with it?
I think, I think we can, I would go first and foremost, one of the things I hear from my customers is similar to what you say, you know, there's almost this curve of, you know, anxiety and what do I do when any G is released, whether it was a 4G or a 5G, you know, Wi-Fi now 6 with, you know, so I think first and foremost, it's more about, you know, it's for me in IoT, it's going to be multi-access. If we talk about 5G or Wi-Fi 6, these are different types of technologies and protocols for connectivity. And I think, you know, when we're talking to people, we're often hearing someone really confused, and it'll be depending on who was in there last. Was it someone who provides 5G and is from a service provider background? Was it someone from a partner that is more of a Wi-Fi specialist and now is pushing everything down Wi-Fi 6? So I think for the listeners, the biggest thing to think about from what we see globally across all industries, not just health, this is going to be multi-access, multi-connectivity type. So it isn't going to be one bet on 5G or one bet on Wi-Fi 6. In fact, you know, we just acquired a company that is wireless technology, not Wi-Fi. You know, Wi-Fi is a protocol that is used in non-licensed, you know, wireless technology versus licensed, probably spectrum and like 5G. We've just acquired a company that's wireless, so it's technology that will help connect different places back in without latency or degradation of speed that might come from another technology. So it all depends actually right down, I would say, is more about the technology, is about the use case from outcomes space first. How urgent is it that things work now and work all the time with no drop off, depending on the technology and how good coverage is, or do you have a dense enough Wi-Fi network, or can you even cable between one old building in a hospital to another with fiber? You might be then looking at wireless technology, wireless backhaul that isn't Wi-Fi 6 or 5G. But first and foremost, to stop the great confusion and anxiety that's out there, I would always go to the, like, what is the outcome you're trying to solve for? What is the use case you're trying to solve for? And then let's think about then reversing from that, what technology connectivity type is the best.
So, I mean, yeah, thanks for the overview. And at the end of the day, I guess they're just much faster, right? Like, I mean, it's just the evolution of speed, right? So if with that in mind, do we really need all that bandwidth from 5G or Wi-Fi 6, you know, and how does the added bandwidth really change, say, IoT or patient care, or is it still something to be discovered, you know, like what do you see as the value of all this extra bandwidth?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. There's always a case of, you know, there's always been through the history of IT, we don't need that much speed or we don't need that much bandwidth and we can get whatever we want. And sometimes it's a business application or problem looking, you know, for, you know, to solve a problem that's not even there yet. So I think you're right. In some cases, there's going to be applications, you know, as we digitize these environments that haven't even thought up of that are going to need this and are going to consume it. And we're in that place right now of IoT because there's so many ideas and applications and new companies coming out with technology based on this early wave of digitizing IoT in these environments. The requests are coming through so thick and fast compared to what we have been in IoT because we've been in it a long time. So, you know, there's that part that's, you know, heavily, you know, people are thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always push on, say, PACS imaging and stuff. They always say, yeah, I'm not sending you your full image, but if the speeds get fast enough, why wouldn't they? Right? But you know, when it comes to a little, and I'll use Fitbit, although they're not really medically relevant, right? Or you know, some other more medically relevant sensor, those sensors are so small and the data is so small, you don't really need 5G. So I guess that's where it's hard to understand the real impact on care that these higher speeds are going to have.
Yeah, and I think it would come down also, like we also forget about the criticality. Like if I talk about data and you find something and you need to act on it and you need to act on it in seconds, which is, you know, or, you know, sub minutes, which is definitely in the case of things like hospitals. It's in the case of things like, think about connected cars, even connected heavy machinery and mines. Seconds means the difference of a patient's health or life, a car maybe having an accident or going off the road, not being able to call for help, and, you know, big mining, it means a multi-million-dollar truck going over the edge of an open pit mine. So some of
Yeah.
this isn't just, this is about the time to act. And it's not just about the size of maybe files or speed, it's about inside these new technologies, there's a lot around packet loss and data not being lost. And
Right.
like you say, some stuff, small sensors that aren't hypercritical, a little bit of data lost here and there, and it's only sending data back every now and then in small packets is fine. But when you're talking about someone's life, health and safety and, expensive machinery, actually loss of data is significant. So when we're in some of these environments, we're talking about, just to use jargon, but you talk about latency, so delay or
Yep.
loss of packet data. It's getting down to milliseconds that companies are going, we cannot sustain anything that has this amount of milliseconds of loss. So you're getting down to that, and a lot of the old technologies, they're never going to keep up with that sort of, or they can't. So that's the other thing to think about that people, I guess, forget about when we're talking about technologies and connectivity types is, is the business, again, the use case and the outcome you're trying to achieve, is it hypercritical right down to those sort of environments? And, you'll hear some people say no initially, and then next thing you know, someone in the line of business is going, no way, we can't have delay of seconds in
Yeah.
this sort of, we need to react now.
That's a great example. And yeah, I've also heard that 5G has some security components and a few things like that that are valuable as well. So, if you look at IoT and really Internet of Medical things in general, what do you think's still holding it back? I mean, maybe you can use your magic wand. If you had a magic wand and you could solve one thing, you think this is what's holding it back. What do you see as the things that are barriers to adoption of IoT?
Yeah, there's a few, and I think mainly you can take that back to we're in a convergence of IT and OT. That's 100% the case. And so if you look at operational technologies that are mainly being provided to all industries, manufacturing, mining, hospitals, they're from big players that have been in those industries as long, if not longer, than Cisco's been in the IT industry. So what that brings in any convergence is different types of technology, different types of protocols for those technologies talking together, or they don't talk together. Different ecosystems of innovation partners that have built up around the likes of Cisco versus built up around one of these other vendors that have been as long. And I think that's really the biggest thing right now is, those, how much do you have invested in these people have been in here a long time versus my data's now locked in there and it actually can't talk out to the cloud, or it's actually not as secure as it used to be because we didn't need those levels of security. That's probably the biggest thing. It's also the massive opportunity because now in this convergence, you've got so many more players interested in this field that the startups happening every day around it are crazy. The companies that have been doing it for a year, and I would say COVID's just accelerated it, IoT in general, and it's also accelerated health. So you're now seeing a lot more money put into it, a lot more development, R&D, as I say, startup companies. So I think on the other hand, you'll start to see a massive catch up of this because quite frankly, there's a lot of areas with us all working at home that aren't spending anything on technology right now. There's certain sort of areas like health that, is an intense point of where people are meeting or where people are going for critical health care. Whereas in, a lot of areas, people are being sent home and are asked not to go there. The CIO in those environments isn't spending any money right now in that space. So, that's another reason why I believe it's accelerating because the CIO in the past would have had to think about, servicing the dominant biggest part of their environment or their networks or their technology budget. A lot of those environments have no people in them anymore. So we're already, I'm seeing a shift of money to obviously those that need to be maintained, but they're all going into areas that probably didn't have the level of investment that should have over the last 5 years. And so, yeah, there's some pros on the convergence, but the cons, but the pros are just like, right now it's, I'd say it's hot, like from everything, the ecosystems, innovation, budgets going there. So I think we're about to see that next level of, breakthrough in IoT and in medicine.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your insights, Dave, and I appreciate you talking about IoT. It is one of the most exciting parts of healthcare, and that convergence is really interesting, and I think it's going to provide some amazing breakthroughs for healthcare. So Thanks so much, Dave, for joining us, and thanks everyone for watching. If you want to check out more great content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com. Thanks, Dave.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.